Welcome, ChangePoint family. If you are joining us not at the end of the worship service, if you're watching this video separately, my name's Tony Murrow. I'm one of the pastors here at the church, and I am joined by a longtime part of the ChangePoint family, Gwen Adams. Gwen, say hello.
Hey, it's good to see you. I'm glad to be here.
So you worked at ChangePoint for 15 years, is that correct?
15 years,
Yeah,
yes.
and what positions did you hold here?
The whole time I was part of women's ministries. In addition to that, I was also a pastor of discipleship development and community groups for different times and different spaces.
Yeah, you're Gwen Adams. Yeah, you started Refresher, and that's great. So Gwen, we have you on the program today because of some exciting news that happened this week. You released a book.
I released a book.
Okay,
yes.
So let's have a look at this book. Tell us about this, Crazy Church Ladies.
Crazy Church Ladies. Well, the Crazy Church Ladies story happened here at ChangePoint, which is kind of a big sentimental deal for me to be back here talking about this book. But the original Crazy Church Ladies are all ChangePoint women. And it's a story of what God did with a group of crazy church ladies from ChangePoint to upend sex trafficking in the state of Alaska.
Okay, well that's wild. For those who are not familiar with the story of Priceless and how all this came to be, give us just a quick summary. How did it come to pass that these crazy church ladies were engaged in something like that?
Well, I was leading the Refresher ministries here, women's ministry here, and we had anywhere from 800 to 1,200 people that came on a regular basis to Refresher, which was a multi-church women's ministry, kind of a ladies' night out that happened maybe 3-4 times a year.
Yeah, we had an IF gathering here last night. Very similar kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Very much so. And I mean, it was just a fantastic estrogen fest. And I personally probably considered myself a failure if people didn't laugh till they peed their pants and bawled their eyes out at every event. So, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And it was honestly the highlight of my time in ministry at ChangePoint. And I'll never forget, I was preparing for a Refresher. I was up in the copy room, and I had been doing a lot of studying around the issue of what it means to be the church. And I was printing off, at the moment, 20 sheets of program notes for Refresher to give to the sound, the light, video, the worship team, all the stuff. And
Very familiar with this process, yes.
Yes. Going over my notes carefully, and I just stopped, and I thought, this is not what Jesus had in mind. It just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I left there in tears. And I didn't have very long before Refresher was starting, but I went back to my office and I just started weeping, and I just said, Jesus, what am I doing? Why am I doing? And he said he was going to show me. He was going to show me a different way. And so I went down that night and just really took the time to look at the faces of the women and asking myself the question, what in the world made her leave her house on a Friday night? The hassle of getting the kids fed, whatever it took, what made her want to come here tonight? What is she hoping to get out of this? And just kind of think there's a hunger and a longing in our women that I don't think we've scratched the surface of. And I want this to look like the way of Jesus. And what is the way of Jesus? If you didn't, now don't get me wrong. I love smoke. I love in worship sets. I love padded chairs. I love fantastic children's ministries. I love all that stuff. But where was the way of Jesus in the middle of all of that? And what was his heart for his church? And so that kind of began a journey of just discovery for me, and began to start meeting with a group of women, the Crazy Church Ladies, and saying, we're just going to pray. We're just going to ask God, what do you want us to do about our city? Where can we have an impact? And we've got 800 to 1,000 women that are meeting in the auditorium. And if we decided to make a dent in our city, we actually could. We actually could. Where? What does that look like? And so we began to pray into that through a story that I don't have time to go into here, but you can read parts of that in the book. This issue of sex trafficking kind of just landed right in the middle of our laps. I mean, it was like, wow, this is actually happening in Alaska? How did I not know about this? And how did I not know it was the second fastest growing crime in our state? And how did I not know that a lot of the people that I had walked beside and lived next to in ministry actually had a piece of this story in their lives? Like, how did I not know that? And so it became pretty evident early on that we were supposed to address this, if nothing else, to expose it. I had no training. I knew enough to know how little I knew. That was about it. And so we began to just form a group of women, and we decided we were just going to pray into this. And that prayer, I'm somebody who was used to gathering large crowds. If we did a Bible study, 150 people showed up to it. And so we thought, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do a big, huge prayer gathering. And we're going to have our women start praying into this effort. And we're going to see what we can do through prayer to end trafficking in our city. And so we had in the Commons there, we had in the Denali room set up and stations set up in the auditorium. We were using the whole space down here. We had stations. You could go to this station and pray for law enforcement. You could go to that station and pray for the shelters around town. And 7 people showed up.
Nice. So one station for each person. That's
2 stations.
2
for each
stations.
person. Something like that. Wow, people don't really care about this, and wow, what did we do wrong? And I felt like God needed to just break my heart for the crazy church ladies. Like, wait a minute. They're ragged, tired. No one wants to come out and pray for this. They don't even know why. Make it easier for her. So we decided to make that prayer expression through a text that would come once a week. And we just called our city to stop what they were doing wherever they were on Wednesdays to pray from noon to 12:15. We sent out whatever characters are allowed in our little app we purchased. And we launched that church-wide, not just with women, but also just church-wide.
I was in there.
In
I
September.
got the revolt text.
You get the revolt text. And so we launched that. We had about 900 people that joined that text. And for the next 9 months, that is all we did. We just prayed into this thing. We launched Priceless. People would say, oh, what kind of cool things are you doing to fight trafficking? And I would just have to say, well, all we do is prayer. I probably even got a little apologetic for it because I maybe felt a little bit ashamed that we weren't doing more. And then got a call from the state troopers. He asked to meet me in a coffee shop. So sat down with him, and he began to tell me a story that I'll never forget. He basically said, we've been tracking what we believe is the biggest sex trafficking case in the country up here in Alaska. It's a huge network. We've been tracking all the different components of this for months now, and you wouldn't believe it. It's like the sun, the moon, and the stars have aligned for us to be getting the information we're getting, and we're just about ready to pull this bus because the tracking device got compromised. He goes, we have nobody to walk with the women, and we believe there's 75 victims. Are you ready? Is Priceless ready to start doing direct client services? And I instantly said yes, and then I felt like, what did I just say? I tried to scoop the words back off the table and shove them back in my mouth because I knew I was going to go back into the office and tell my leaders what I had just committed them to. And it was like throwing them into the deep end of the pool. It's like, jump in there. And so I started backpedaling with him saying, okay, hang on a second. All we do right now is pray, and we're church ladies, and we don't have any training. I don't know the first thing about any of this, but if you're willing to just take a bunch of crazy church ladies along for the ride, I'm going to say yes. And he rolled his eyes and he said, bring on the crazy church ladies. So that's where the title of the book came from. And from then on, in our state, not just with the troopers, but with law enforcement, APD, and the FBI have known our group, as Priceless has been called the Crazy Church Ladies.
Somebody called the Crazy Church Ladies. That is the amazing, the incredibleness of that story is the normalness of the people involved.
Yeah.
And the extraordinariness of God. I mean, you guys took such tremendous risks.
Well, and for the trooper to say, we've been tracking this case for 9 months, and that goes right back to the very month, September, when we opened up the Revolt prayer text to our community. Like, there's no way to look at the story of Priceless without seeing the hand of God move.
And that's powerful. That's a reason to go to church.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't bring anything to the table. I had none of those skills, like, honestly, none of those skills. Yeah.
Gwen, what's some of your biggest lessons learned in this whole thing? I mean, 15 years in ministry on a church staff, and then being led by the Lord into this kind of wild and crazy adventure. What lessons has the Lord taught you through all this that you'd share with our church, your church?
I think one of the most, I can't hardly talk about this without crying, but God taught me what it meant to be a loved woman, loved by Him in maybe ways I never quite understood. And God taught me what it meant to love others in that same way. I think being a pastor on a staff for so long, a couple things, love always has had a payoff for me. If I love my husband well, there's a huge payoff to that, right? If I love my kids well, I have healthy kids. If I love the volunteers that I was leading in ministry, they volunteered more faithfully and stuck with me. And to be thrown in a place where I'm in front of people that if I love them, there is no payoff. Like, it's just love. There's no payoff. I don't know if they'll find Jesus or not. I often don't get to know the end of the story. I often have to attend funeral for them, or they get kidnapped and go missing again. And I'm still called to show up, because I'm just called to show up. And I was telling you a little earlier, I kind of look at, you'll see the story of Gomer and Hosea out of the book of Hosea woven through the whole book, Crazy Church Ladies, because I felt like God brought her into my life in living color. And I got to walk with Gomer. And, basically the story of Gomer is, Hosea married a prostitute. And then she, she has 3 kids. That third child that they have together is named Lo-Ami, which means not my. Hosea names him not mine, not my flesh and blood. He knew that that child was born from one of her lovers, and she goes back into the life, and he provides for her even while she completely destroys and betrays their marriage. And he's raising 3 kids and has this wayward wife. She ends up as a temple prostitute going back on the auction block. And by that time, the time a temple prostitute ends up back on the auction block and is being sold, she's being sold for super cheap labor. She's no longer can even bring in enough money as a prostitute to be worth her bread and water at the temple. And so she ends up being sold, and he comes and he pays this exorbitant amount to buy back his wife. And the thought going through her head of, like, he's buying me back to kill me. Like, I'm sure this is the end of me. This is Hosea's ultimate revenge. Instead, he restores her to the family. He restores her, and the pivotal verse in the whole book is, you'll no longer call me master, but you will call me husband. And even though he purchased her as a slave, restores her to this place of intimacy and love, and renames all 3 children, but that last one is renamed Ami, my own flesh and blood. I got to watch that story in real life. I got to watch myself be restored in that way. See myself as Gomer, see the one that I had also hoard out my talents, gifts, and things for a payoff. If I do a good job in ministry, there's a big payoff to that for me. And I think, working at Change Point those years, there was beautiful things that happened. I can never deny that. I learned so much and grew so much, but there was also mixed in there some of my own Phariseeism. And I had to recognize my own part in being part of the problem of church being an industry or a job that was a production machine rather than an intimate encounter with the person of Jesus Christ and leading people to that same place. And had to find my own and confess my own part in being part of the problem of creating a massive ministry machine and forsaking, I think, sometimes the soul of the gospel.
I doubt you're the only pastor who's ever been brought to face that by the Lord. I have a strong intuition that others may have faced that same thing. So let's talk about ways to connect with you. Where can people find the book? Are there other ways to get connected? You want to talk about Engage training? How can people who are
the book is on pre-order. I was supposed to have it March 3rd, didn't come, and sold out instantly on Amazon. So you can't even...
I was hanging out the night of the release because I'm like, oh, I'll get Gwen's new book because I'm going to have her as a guest on The Commons. No, it's like 3, 2, 1, sold out. Okay.
So soon. That's all I can say. I have not actually had the copy. Of course, I have the copy digitally, but I haven't had the copy of the book in my hands. So the book can be sold pre-orders through my website, which is GwenAdamsFiles.com. So it can be ordered there. I do a lot of blogs and things there. I'm starting a podcast, which you just committed before the show to helping me get going.
Yes. Yeah. One church, one body of Christ, many parts. So yes, I will help you.
Yes. And the podcast will be called Crazy Church Ladies, Questions, Answers, and Opinions, because I honestly don't have a lot of answers. I have a lot of opinions, though. So I want to make sure to clarify that.
As long as you include it in the subtitle, I think there's integrity there.
Yeah. And so that podcast will be coming, and of course, Priceless. You can connect with me through the ministry of Priceless, and we have trained over 600 now mentors to walk alongside of either disenfranchised youth or women who've been trafficked. And we do the training through something called Engage Training, and you can you can become a crazy church lady. We actually have crazy church men now too, which is pretty exciting. A whole nother story. But so you can connect with me through the actual Priceless website as well.
Fantastic. Ordinary people, extraordinary God. God bless you, Change Point. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.